Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to Social Confoes. I'm your host, Diego, together with my co host, Shanluk. And today we have another guest after a long time. So we're ready to get into it. Shanluk, how was your week? And tell us a bit on what people can expect today.
So interesting. Today's interesting. So for people outside of Suriname, today is a double holiday in Suriname. We celebrate two different groups. We celebrate the indigenous, the Amerindians who lived here, the first inhabitants of Suriname, and we also celebrate the Japanese, the migrant workers who came from Indonesia after the slavery was abolished. They came here as migrant workers. So we celebrate both uh, these two groups both today. But I was listening to your introduction, and for the past week I had to go through old episodes, like old
Yeah,
Social Conference episodes, and to hear the growth from how you used to do that same intro to how you do it now, and the difference in cadence and also in energy level on how you present it. It's interesting. I think you should definitely check out some old Social Conference episodes from like last year to get an idea what I'm talking about. So
oh, definitely.
yeah,
But yeah, so yeah, I actually didn't realize today was, a holiday. So I was just getting up and like getting into the groove. Actually,
yeah,
was busy setting up some databases. But
yeah.
yeah,
It,
let's
it
get
was a
into it.
busy day. It was definitely a busy day. But getting into it, our guest for today is somebody who I met in San Diego during social media marketing world, and a couple of years back before COVID. Giano, who's also been a guest on this show, and we kind of it's our thing to go. He goes from Curacao. I go from Suriname. Often we're in a group of three, four people from Suriname that go to San Diego. And at a certain point, Giano was like, "Yeah, I'm really satisfied now because I'm working together. I'm part of a team that's being led by this guy Jeff, and he's just an awesome dude." And I was like, okay. And Giano was raving on about how awesome Jeff was. And, um, Jeff being the guy that he was at a certain point also took the opportunity and introduced himself to me. And we started kind of hitting it off, talking about different topics. And then last, actually this year during social media conference, I came to the conference, and all of a sudden Jeff was in our team because Jeff used to be like one of the leads of the room hosts, like making sure that everything is proper in the room, and he'll tell a little bit about that as well. But he changed to the Can Do squad, the squad that I've been in for the past three editions of the conference. And now he was all of a sudden he was my lead instead of being Giano's lead, and I got to experience like what Giano was talking about. And I think this was I'm not sure that's a good thing, but this was for me the most easygoing social media conference that I ever had as part of the Can Do squad, because yeah, working as part of the team of Jeff is like one of the best things to experience. So if you're ever in social media marketing world as a volunteer and you get to work in a team, just hope that Jeff is your lead, and you're gonna have your best conference to date. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jeff Howell. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm great, man. I'm not sure I can live up to those expectations that you've set up for me, but
Uh,
dude, it's so cool for you to have me on this podcast, man. I'm excited about being here. Um, I didn't
yeah,
know
sure.
that you had two holidays today, man. That is, God, I wish we did that.
Well,
Yeah,
we end up with like 18 different holidays
Hmm.
because kind of every ethnic group kind of has their own holiday. And imagine if the US would do the same thing that our country is doing, you'd probably end up with maybe 30
I
like
wish we did.
holidays.
I wish we did.
So
We need to celebrate all
yeah,
of the groups that we have in this country. We just don't
yeah,
do that, man. We have
yeah,
we have the occasional group that we groups that we celebrate, man. But it'd be great if we
I
took
think
that time and celebrated as many groups and people who have had the the fortune and sometimes misfortune of building this country. It'd be great if we could, take a step back and actually celebrate them like Suriname does, man. That's awesome. I love hearing that.
so. On state level, is
Mhm.
it different? Like, are there like several states in the U.S. that celebrate certain holidays separately from other states?
Yeah, the states have their own. I mean, they're just federal holidays, obviously, but then each of the governors of the states typically will have their own ability to create certain holidays based on um, celebrities or important sports figures or important community activists or something like that. They might say, "Hey, today is XYZ holiday to celebrate the contributions of this individual to this state or this community," and that's pretty cool. Um, and I love that the states have that ability to do that. But it's not always quite as celebrated. It's like you kind of have to be within that kind of community to know
So it's
that.
more like in marketing terms, more niche, more
Exactly,
more
significantly more
specific,
niche.
and it's whereas like for us, it's more like a cultural,
Hmm.
historical, like a moment in
Yeah,
time recognition.
yeah, and I think there was a time where I think the American culture did celebrate that, celebrate um, maybe the wrong groups of people or just a different groups of people, but there was more. I think there was more emphasis put on that, um, but it's not so much anymore.
Mm.
Well, here's the thing: we call it a national holiday, but
Yeah.
like we're a population of 600,000. So like
Okay.
compared to most states, it's like okay,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
it's less
it
than a
would be
state.
like a local thing, like
Sure. No, I
when you're
got you.
wearing it.
I
Yeah.
got you.
So okay, but here's the fun thing. So
Right.
when we were researching, because I was like, okay, let's see how much I know about Jeff. What are the
Okay.
topics that we can talk about?
Okay.
Because of course we can talk about social media, but that would be too easy. So
Sure.
when we started researching, we found like a lot of Jeff Howells, like a lot of them. So,
With a lot. What do you mean?
like um, we found an artist or was I'm not sure if it's a guitar player or a
Oh yeah,
very
there's a bass
yeah
player for a band
yeah
in Florida.
yeah.
Then there's a Major League Baseball pitcher. Um, there's me,
Mhm.
and there I believe there is a street painter in San Francisco, and there's one other dude. This one I don't really claim. I think he's a hillbilly in Tennessee. He's the guy. I think he like if you ever see the picture of those white dudes in those like blocky sunglasses that drive trucks. If you ever seen that meme before? I think that Jeff Howell's one of those guys. I
Okay,
don't claim him.
I think there's
Okay,
there's
so,
there's one more. I think I saw also
Okay.
like also somebody a tech industry vice president,
Oh
global vice
yeah.
president. Yeah,
Yes, I
and
remember
and
seeing
a,
him.
and a journalist as well.
Oh yeah, from New York. I've seen him. He writes a column for a paper in New York. Yeah.
so let's go into that a bit. So, what was it like searching your own name the first time in Google, like, and when you found all
Mhm.
these different Jeffs,
Oh my
like,
gosh, dude. All right, so
what was your approach?
if you go way back into my Facebook profile pictures, one of my first ones was a snapshot of this dude who wrote that column for in New York. I just found like a Google image of him of like his byline and his little profile picture for the newspaper. So that was one of my first like Facebook profile pics. It's surreal, man. It's like you think about you look at you think your name Jeff Howell. Now Jeff is a pretty common name, and Howell is actually somewhat common too. It's a Welsh surname from Wales near Scotland, and there's actually a whole lot more Howells than I thought there was. And when you kind of put those two things together, obviously there's going to be a significant amount of people that have my name. So trying to. I think the first time that I encountered this is when I was trying to come up with a name for my Gmail account. I just wanted it to be like straight up just Jeff.Howell because I figured, well, I'm the only one, right? And this was really early on in the adoption of Gmail for most people. So I figured I'd be able to get Jeff.Howell, no big deal. And I found out that it like Jeff.Howell was taken, Jeff Howell was taken, Jeff underscore Howell was taken, J Howell was taken. Like there was all of these different combinations of what I wanted my email address to be to, because your email address is sort of like who you are. It's part of your identifier of what makes you you. And when I couldn't get the one I wanted, I was like, man, that sucks. Um, so I stick with J Howell 76, which is cool, but um so then that sort of tracked me into thinking about, well, how many other Jeff Howells are there? So this was actually, early in Google's life too, where it'd been around for a few years. And so I started just searching Jeff Howell and I started seeing all of these different people that had my name. And it's kind of surreal because you sort of wonder like what what kind of experience does that person have? What's their life like? And if they were searching for their own name too and I popped up, did they ever think about like, well, what's this Jeff Howell like? What does he do? How does he interact? Like this one Jeff Howell from Michigan, man, he hates Chris Collinsworth. What's that about? You know? Um there's so you sort of look at you look at your name, you see your name, it's part of who you are, and then you realize that your name is attached to another individual, another person, another identity, another dude with a different face, and it's almost kind of surreal, but it makes you think about um, it almost makes the world smaller because you know that there are different people with the same name having different experiences in their life, having a different reality than you are, and it makes you wonder like, what are they like? You share the same name. What other shared experiences or different experiences might you have?
Have paths ever crossed like that? Incidentally, you bump into one of them like on in the online space.
No, I haven't. Well, no, that's not true. There was a guy on Facebook that added me that had the same name. I don't really know much about him or where he was from. Oh, no, wait a minute. Now that you mention it, there was a kid in high school that had my name. All right, so this is a
Whoa.
story.
Okay.
This is a story. Um, so all right, way, way, way back when a group of Howells moved from Wales or
A
Scotland,
group of house.
yeah, I know,
I like
right?
it.
A group of Howells. They actually settled in Toronto, Canada. This was way, way back in the 1800s. They settled in Toronto, and then there were two groups that split off. One settled in Detroit, Michigan, where my parents were born, and where I was born. And then there was a group of Howells that sort of settled in central New York. Now get this. When I was when I was very young, we moved to Boston. I lived in Boston for a few years and I loved it. But then we settled in, guess where? Central New York. And I happened to go to Lansing School District, which also just happens to be where a bunch of these Howells settled. So like I show up and the first thing everybody asks me, if I am I related to Terry Howell? Am I related to Ben Howell? Am I related to Cindy Howell? Am I related to Ben Howell's brother, Jeff Howell? And so this other Jeff Howell was I think he was 2 or 3 years below me in school. And so, yeah, man, I totally forgot about that. There was another Jeff Howell in my school. And it's a small school. I graduated with a class of 76 people. So like the entire 9 through 12 high school was only like 400 kids and there were two Jeff Howells in it. Man, I totally
That's
forgot about that.
that's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. Yeah, I had not exactly the similar experience, but I have like I used to be like the only known Jean-Luc in Suriname, but there's
Yeah.
actually now I think one is more for me sometimes more famous because he's an artist, he's a
Oh,
poet, and he
okay.
won one of the national poet competitions
Cool.
here. So that's Yosafat, Jean-Luc Yosafat Koloku. He's an artist, and then there's another one Shaluk Maranjo, who's in the same industry as I am.
Oh, no
And we
way.
kind of work in the same kind of field, and I worked together with one or two of his employers in the past. So
Yeah.
occasionally, I would get sent an email that was supposed to
Oh,
be
go
sent
to
to
this other
him,
guy.
and the other way around as
That's
well. And
funny.
then we would text each other and have fun. And the funniest experience we had is he used to work for a company that I also worked for.
Hmm.
And at a certain point, the CEO of the company sent me a text like, "You have to arrange this and this and this and this for sushi night."
Okay.
And I was like, "You sure this is intended for me?" And she replied of something like, "Of course, you dummy," or some, not
Right.
necessarily those words, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
threw it off like, come on, just do your job.
Quit playing.
But in a fun way. And then I don't remember if I just called her and say like, "Hey, listen, I'm really sure this was intended for the other Charlotte," but those instances happen. So
That's funny.
it's really fun in those cases because we really laugh about it because we actually have a good relationship. So we can text back and forth say like, you won't believe what happened to me today, or like, I sent you this email because I feel like this doesn't belong in my inbox.
Right.
But I really want to jump to ask you guys both a question. What was your first email address?
My first email. Logan1980 at yahoo.com.
Wow.
Logan 88.
Where
Logan
does Logan
Logan
go?
Logan 1980 at yahoo.com. And all right, there's a story behind this one. All right.
Okay.
So I was really big and I still am into comic books. I'm one of those comic book nerds. I love the MCU and I love Marvel comics. And one of my favorite characters growing up was Wolverine. And Wolverine's, real name's Logan. Well, for at the time before they found out what his real name was, it was Logan. And um and then I was dating a girl at the time who was born in 1980. So Logan 1976 was taken. So I did Logan 1980 at Yahoo, which I haven't logged into that email
Do you
address
still
in.
owe it
I
though?
I haven't logged into it in probably 12 years.
Oh, then
I don't
you
even.
might have to recover it.
I might have to.
Yeah, you might have to recover it.
I might have to.
Diego, do you remember what your first email
Yeah, I
address?
think it was Hotmail. I'm not exactly sure what the order was, but it had something with Blitz in it and my first name. So it was either Diego Blitz or Blitz Diego. And that was before I moved to Gmail. It was short-lived, I think 2 or 3 years around high school. Then I swapped to Gmail as
Mm.
Gmail was coming out, and we had IT classes. And then
Wait, you
I
were in
like
high school when Gmail? Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah, there's an age difference. There's
I,
like
s- I
there are
clearly,
different
yeah,
age gaps.
I
Yeah,
see
there.
that.
Yeah, so that's why we went in that direction, Jeff, to
my
give you
bad.
like
No, you're good,
yeah,
dude. You're
yeah,
good,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah,
it was around high
yeah.
school, and no, I don't have X. Like Hotmail swapped. I did use it for a brief period, and then Hotmail swapped over to I think
Outlook.
Live.com, I think.
Outlook.
Yeah, with Outlook.
Yeah, Outlook. Yeah.
Outlook. So I migrated it to Outlook, claimed the normal my first last name there, and then I think I just deactivated or deleted the other account.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whenever I don't use something anymore, I like delete it now. Like
yeah,
I don't like having traces of my stuff online for stuff I don't use.
I get you. I'm squatting on Jeff.Howell at Outlook. I got that one as soon as they were transitioning from Hotmail to Outlook, and I have Jeff.Howell, and I'm not getting rid of it. What about you, Jean? Look, what was your first
Yeah,
email
I'm
address?
now taking if when they switched to Outlook, if I did claim or not.
Mm.
But I started with Sark Rally Freak underscore Rally
Oh
Freak
my god!
at hotmail.com. So you have to understand, like
I know what a
Sark,
Sark is.
the initials are SARK,
Okay.
which is the Surinamese
Auto
car
Rally Club.
rally club.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
like
okay.
it's like
All right.
car, it's like auto rally.
Hmm.
And at the time I was like 14, I think, 13,
Oh,
14.
so of course you were into cars and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
not? Right.
So I got it. I think it was around 1998, somewhere around 98. I think I actually got my Yahoo early 2000s. So the interesting thing is most people in the 90s got Yahoo was, I mean, Yahoo was big.
Yeah, it was it. Yeah.
Yeah, Yahoo was it. But
I
of
don't
course,
know Yahoo.
the cool kids, like the children, the high school children, they went for Hotmail because Hotmail, yeah, that was good. I even had a, I think I had a Jean-Luc at hotshot.com even, I think as
Hot
well.
shot.
This was like,
Oh man.
yeah, these were like email. I don't, that one I completely lost track of it. I
Mm.
think I might still have my Hotmail, and I also have a Yahoo, which is even a crazier story because I won't say the name of the Yahoo one. I
That's okay.
don't think it's appropriate.
Say it.
You're good. You're good.
No, we're good. We're good. So the reason why I ask is because you kind of you transitions. You've had the experience of working in offline spaces as
Yeah.
well as both as in the media and as graphic designer, and then you've seen the rise of like how social media. Back now we're talking about Web 3.0,
Right.
but or Web 3, but then we were talking about Web 2
Yeah.
basically. So
Right.
so just for people like Diego who've never experienced had that experience of
Hmm.
well, he might have like the very early ages of
Listen.
what the
Yeah.
offline world was like. What was that like for
I
you?
I'll tell you some stuff that'll blow your mind, Diego. Like so. All right. In the printing industry. So my career started in print. Okay. I went to school for what's was called offset lithography. All
I'm,
right.
I'm also in the print industry.
Oh, so you get it. All right. So I'm going to blow your mind here, so you'll understand. So when I was in high school, I went to a tech college. It was kind of like where your junior year and your senior year, so 11th and 12th grade in America, in some places, you could go to a trade school and learn a trade. And so what I did is I went for printing offset lithography. And so I learned how to do, you know, negative strip and negative shooting and stripping and plate making and all that stuff, like manual stuff, Diego. Listen, so I used to have to do I used to have to take like a layout, and sometimes I'd have to do it manually with like a mechanical layout and go to a camera. And so Jean-Luc, this camera would be like it would be huge. It would be like it would take up a room, and it would have like this platform on the very bottom where you'd put the original piece that you needed to take a picture of, right? And then there would be like these big what thing called bellows, right? This accordion thing that would go up and down. And then on the very top of it, it would be you put your piece of film and it would vacuum suck it down to the tray, and then you would expose the film with a bright light that's on this camera. Then you'd process the piece of film like you would a photograph, right? And it would be a negative, so it would be black and then clear after you processed it. And then you'd have to do something called stripping, and then you'd have to take like this piece of orange um, film, this kind of orange plasticky thing called ruby lith, and you would have to tape it in position of where this thing was supposed to be on the page when it was being printed. So then you would take the what they called flat or a strip negative. Then you'd have to take it to a plate maker. Now the plate maker was a high UV source light, and you'd have to take this aluminum plate that would have emulsion on it, and the emulsion was like now I don't know if you remember like the back of like film, like camera film, where it's kind of like that orangey tan thing. That's called emulsion. It's the same thing, but sometimes it'd be green, sometimes it'd be brown, based on the type of plate that you were using. And so you'd have to take this negative and put it into a plate maker, and then you have to burn the image of the negative into the plate, and then you'd have to manually like wash away the like chemically treat the plate so it would wash away the emulsion. Oh dude, like for real, Jean-Luc, I get it. That's a lot, man. And then either you could put it through a machine, or when I was in school I actually learned how to do it manually. I'd have to take like this soft bristle brush and treat it with this chemical, and then take it under some water, wash it again, and then I'd have to put the chemically treated again, so that when you took it to the press, the spaces that had the burned in image from the negative would accept the ink, so then it would transfer it to a rubber blanket, and then that would transfer it to the paper, and then whatever didn't have an image on it would take on what would they call the water or the plate wash. And so you had to do all that manually, right? So like right now, you could go to a computer, you print off a bunch of copies of whatever you want to print, right?
Yeah, it's
Black
just
and white, whatever.
digital. The
Yeah,
printer interprets it,
right.
everything.
So now but back way back in whatever time it was, so you'd have to take the mechanical thing, the mechanical you built by hand, or a printed off copy from like um uh what was it called? I don't remember the name of the program. It was pre InDesign. PageMaker, that's what it was. And then you'd print off one copy of it. You take it to the camera. You shoot the negative. You strip the negative. You make the plate. Then you take the plate. You put it on the press, and then you'd have to like ink up the plate. And then you have to find this balance between the water and the ink to make sure that it's not too much, right? And so then you take the if once you inked up the plate properly, then you take it to then you would um, squeeze the plate cylinder and the blanket cylinder. The blanket cylinder was this rubber blanket rubber thing, and then you would take the sheet would go through the press, but then it would be squeezed between the blanket and this other thing called the impression cylinder, and all of that would take you probably 4 hours, maybe an hour and a half if you were
And
really
what if
good.
you messed up like at step
You
7?
you have to start all over again, man. Start all and you waste all that time, you waste the plate, waste the negative. Oh, don't get me started on trying to like shoot halftones either. Because when you wanted to do a picture, like you couldn't just print a picture on a laser printer like you can now, or a dye sublimation printer or a screen or whatever. No, dude, a you had to take like a screen, like a DPI screen, and you'd take into the camera that I was talking about before. You'd have to break up like a continuous tone photograph, right? Which is what all pictures are, continuous tone, and then break it up into the little tiny dots because a press can't handle a continuous tone, or else it looks like a Xerox copy of a picture, right? So you have to break it up into little tones. So like the larger the dot, that's where the shadows are, and the smaller the dot, that's where the highlights are. But you had to do that manually back then. You couldn't just send it to a negative printer, which I mean you can do that now. You can actually go direct to plate now, but you'd have to actually like print out, take the photograph, to go to the camera. You'd have to mess around with the screen to make sure it was the right angle, dude.
You can do so
It was
much
like
more now.
caveman days, man. But I learned how to do all that.
And
Yeah.
you still remember it all
I still
vividly.
remember it.
And
Very
also
impressive.
because you remember it, you know kind of the process that has now been kind of digitalized. So
Right,
when something goes wrong, you know which part of the process it went wrong because you know
right,
all the different processes. I
right.
mean, I've had this discussion with my dad, who was like in the 80s was into computers, and
Okay, yeah.
like he knows MS-DOS. Like I've seen MS-DOS. I know the commands that I have to do to
Yeah,
play games,
yeah.
but aside from that, like it's completely foreign for me.
It
But it's
is, and
interesting. Yeah.
it is interesting, and I
Yeah.
think that translates well to understanding how far we've come. Obviously, I mean, it's just the amount of information and the ability that we've gotten from, um, you know, doing all of this manual work to produce a page, to being able to do a lot of it digitally. There's a lost art there. We've
Oh,
lost
definitely.
that craftsmanship of producing something, right? So now the production is, your Facebook posts or your content or your blog post or your video or your TikTok or whatever. And all of that stuff's great because it does take some energy and some knowledge to produce something like that. Um, but sometimes when you think about how the foundation of where this stuff came from, um,
I have
it
that with
actually makes me
presentations,
appreciate, sometimes it makes you appreciate where we
the
are
art
even
form.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, the art form. So I have that with presentations. Like
Hmm.
a lot of people, even in my team, they look like, for them it's insane how fast I can put a PowerPoint, like a PowerPoint presentation of two
Right.
hours. I
Right.
put it together like in, they will say 10 minutes, but it's closer to 20 to half an hour.
Sure.
And basically the process of thinking what slides, what's the setup of the presentation,
Mhm.
that starts like 3 weeks in advance. So
Right.
3 weeks in advance, I'm making notes in Evernote and thinking like, okay, I want to first off start off with this topic. Okay, these three subtopics I've already covered this like 10 times. So
Yeah.
these slides I can just get them from that presentation or I have them there in my computer.
Mhm.
So when I finally have to put the whole presentation together, it's basically just copy paste or taking stuff from what I've done in the past. But when I first started, like at university, my very first presentation that I had to give was on an overhead projector, which meant that I had to print out the slides first at the copy shop before I could actually present. So yeah,
Right.
so
Right.
so if you make a mistake and you forget something or leave something
Mhm.
out of the slide, it's not like, oh, I can just go in my PowerPoint and just
Right.
correct it. You would have
Yeah.
to reprint the whole slide and you would have to go to the copy shop. There would be a
Mhm.
line because there's like thousands of students, so you wouldn't
Right.
be the only one. And then you finally get your slides and then you have to run back to the building where you have to present. So
Mhm.
basically you had to be way more prepared than you have to be now.
We had to be more precise. It's yeah, preparation for sure. But I think sometimes your employees forget all of the mental preparation that you do ahead of time. Like you said, about 3 weeks ahead, you're thinking about, okay, I got to do this presentation in a couple of weeks. What am I going to do? And yeah, so your execution doesn't take that long, but your precision and your preparation and all of that takes so much more time than that.
So, question on preparation, like
Mhm.
you've been into production, print production,
Yeah.
and um, when you transition to digital, more
Mhm.
creative stuff,
Right.
how was the transition for you, as in going from the production side to
Mhm.
the more creative side in this media transition that you've
Sure, sure.
done?
And actually it wasn't it was actually quite easy for me because I was able to translate a lot of the work I was doing in pre or like what they call pre-press, right? All of the stuff that happens before you take something to a press and translate that into sort of what they call electronic pre-press. So that's when you use something like Quark or PageMaker or a page layout program. And I was learning that on the job that I was at. And what I found is that as I was working with these customer files, whether they be magazines or periodicals or, I used to work on things like Crane's Business News or a bunch of different magazines. I was able to see like how meticulous the designer was in being true to the brand that they were working with, right? So I was seeing how Cranes was consistent through all their pages. They had their iconography a certain way. They had their page layout a certain way. They had the the column width a certain size, and the dimensions between the columns was all the same. The logo was always a certain distance from other elements or a certain distance from the gripper side, right? So I was watching as I'm working with these files and doing what's called pre-flighting, making sure that all the fonts were there, the images were there, everything was working properly and as it should. I was taking some extra time and learning how all of these premium brands that we were printing these things for were handling their own stuff. And it was pretty obvious when you would get a file where they just didn't give a crap, right? It was obvious. Like they're just like, whatever, we're just going to print this thing because we're going to print this thing. And so when I was done working at that print factory and started working for a Kinko's of all things. Now, you're familiar with Kinko's? It was like it's FedEx office now. Um, Kind of like a copy shop, UPS store kind of stuff. Um, and when I was also working with the school newspaper on the college I was going to, I took a lot of those lessons that I learned, those things I saw working on those customer files and applying them to the stuff I was doing. And if I wanted to have a professional looking whatever I was working on, I needed to be very careful about how that branding or the font choices, the image choices, and how the thing was laid out. I had to be really careful because I wanted to produce something that looked professional and looked like that I was being very careful with whatever brand I was working on, whether it be my own or somebody else's. And so the transition from just like a tactile physical production piece to digital was pretty easy because I already had that meticulous care of branding from early on, and that understanding of how are you portrayed not just in production or on a printed piece of paper, but it also made sense to me digitally too. How is your brand portrayed online through a website, or back then it was just like a web page, or when Facebook became a thing, how your brand was utilizing the space that Facebook provided you, all that kind of stuff. So the transition to digital really wasn't that difficult because what was important to me when I was doing digital and social was how is the audience viewing whatever branding or whatever iconography or whatever message the brand wanted to portray.
This is really interesting. The reason why I find this interesting is because a lot of people that go into the online space now or on social
Mhm.
media, often it's their first job.
Sure.
So they don't have that like knowing like how brands work. And that's where it becomes difficult because then they
Yeah.
want to work for a brand, like a big brand, and
Right.
they come up with something really creative but completely against brand guidelines. And
Exactly.
they just don't understand where the disconnect is. But we
Mhm.
have our first question from one of the viewers.
Oh,
And
cool.
Gregory wants to know, like, is there a reason behind the formats? Or is it like the best practice and everybody kind of follows their lead? Because they're kind of like in print,
Mhm.
there's also kind of like there's certain formats
Oh,
for
sure.
flyers for, but also to digital you get
Mhm.
certain. So how, what's, is there a reason behind the A4, A5, A6 formats? I hope, Gregory, that that's what you mean, by the way.
Um, well, when it came to printing, I think the formatting just came to whatever the um the 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 standard like a paper company came up with. Um, so from what I remember from school, the different sizes of sheets came out of a a certain flat size, right? So it was like however many sheets you could get out of a certain size source piece of paper. So I think the sort it was like 36 by 40,
Is that a
36.
A1?
No,
No,
it was like a very
A4.
large sheet of paper,
Okay.
and so you would take a ream of that, 500 sheets of this very large piece of paper, and you'd have to cut it in a way to get the maximum amount of sheets of A4 paper that you wanted. In America, it's 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17, right? And or and then a legal size, 8.5 by 14. And so like those sizes were dictated based on the original size that the paper mill created. But as far as the formatting, I think that Gregory might be getting into is like the digital form or like the formatting of the particular um, why does a flyer have to have certain column, certain guidelines, certain grids, right? It's almost like photography where
Yeah,
the rule of thirds,
yeah.
where you take your picture and you have to put in you have to do your composition within a certain You break the frame up into three sections, and you have to compose your picture in a certain way to for it to be, and I think that's what George is referring to. Um, a lot of the formats really just came from how it was produced, right? So, like, there was something called a gripper. So, like on a press, there would be like this metal arm that had little grippers on it, and it was an eighth of an inch away from the edge of the sheet, and so you couldn't have any content that close to the edge of the sheet because the little gripper had to pull it, had to be able to grab the sheet to send it through the press, right? And if you had content in that area, it wouldn't be printed on. And um, so that was one of the main reasons why you couldn't go to the edge until you started having things like bleeds and crop marks, and you'd be able to print on you know, a little bit larger sheet, so you have things print off the edge, but then you would cut it on the crop marks, and then you would have the bleed over the crop marks, so you'd be able to have it. It looked like you printed all the way to the edge, but in fact you didn't. You just were you were printing on a larger sheet of paper, but then you were cutting it down to 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 or whatever. Um, so that when people started doing that, then it was sort of like the formatting went out the window. You could produce and create however you wanted to. Um, but somewhere along the way, whether it be because of premium brands or however it happened, you would have your director of marketing or your VP of marketing or whatever, and they would interact with the creative manager, and they would come up with these brand standards, right? So like your logo had to be a certain points away from the edge of the sheet of the cut sheet, right? And the point size of your font had to be your name was was 10 point bold of this particular font, and then your title was italicized but it was 3 points smaller, and the leading between the lines was a certain amount of width. And some people might say that that was just micromanagement, but it was the premium brand taking a interest and how their brand was represented on every little piece of printed material and digital material that they were using. And if you look at a lot of brand guidelines now and they incorporate digital, they do the same thing, right? They'll take the size, the pixel width, and the pixel height of a Facebook cover photo, and they will dictate that their logo has to be, certain pixel width from the edge here or here, and then to accommodate the Facebook mobile app versus the desktop app. And so you've got to make sure that everything fits within that particular way because we care about our brand and we need to have the formatting and the guidelines set up a certain way.
But these are also the brands that
Mhm.
everybody knows
Yeah,
because they keep to these guidelines.
right,
That makes them strong. I guess.
right.
Yeah,
Pepsi,
I'm
Coke. I
yeah
mean, Disney's notorious for that.
yeah. So
Um,
I see it in clients that we have. Like
mhm,
we know like the big multinational clients that we have.
yeah,
When we do campaigns for them, we get like a PDF of 30, 40 pages with like
right,
everything. Like even if 20 of those 30 pages are like basic stuff that you're like,
right.
okay, there's still 10 pages that are like, okay, but you have to oblige by these rules.
Hmm.
Whereas other companies are like, oh yeah, okay, so you do our social, right? You make our post. Could you make that document for us? And we're like, wait a minute, you know, that
The
document is it's not the same as just
Yeah, it
making
isn't the
a post.
same thing at all. How you do things on digital is way different than you do like in a physical property. Um, but in the digital space, in e-commerce, for instance, when we're creating the e-commerce portals, we get brand guidelines all the time, and we have to fit to them. There are some brands that will take, particular theme that we have, and they will be okay with us kind of adjusting it so the colors are the same, and we'll pop their logo in there, and we'll adjust a few things where it may not be 100% to their branding standards, but they also don't want to pay for a fully customized theme. Some brands are okay with making concessions. Okay. But then we have some of our distributors that their clients are just like, hey, it needs to be this way. And we are very particular about our brand standards, our guidelines, the theme that you create. We don't care how much it costs. This is how it has to be. And that's just the nature of how it is. And we have to take all of that into account when we're doing our portal development, to say, okay, well, what is the platform that we're developing on capable of? Can we meet these? Do we have to ask them to make concessions? Um, all that kind of stuff. And we don't typically run into that issue that much, but on occasion we do. Especially if somebody's looking for like an animated banner, yeah, not something we can really handle on our platform at the moment, but um, the the type of requests that we can't handle are few and far between at this point. Um, but brand standards are brand standards, and they are going to matter whether it be a printed postcard or a product tile on an e-commerce platform.
So, on the topic of brand standards
Yeah,
in relation to e-commerce or just companies in general,
sure.
um, have you encountered or how do you view external branding versus internal branding? So, usually companies focus a lot on external branding,
Yeah,
and you're talking about portals. If you're talking about big companies with a lot of employees,
yeah,
how much emphasis or what's the balance on external branding, like to your consumers, but
sure.
also branding towards your staff, towards your
Okay.
team?
So I may have a little bit different idea on this. Okay. And the reason why is I have always had the school of thought that your employees are your greatest brand ambassadors, right? So you, as an owner of your brand, whether it be your director of marketing or a CEO or a VP of marketing, whatever, um, your employees need to understand your branding as much or if not more than your consumer, right? So your consumer is going to say, "Hey, I recognize that brand. It means quality. It means something I like. I bought from them before. I have enjoyed my experience. The relationship with this brand is meaningful to me. So I'm going to make another purchase decision to buy a product or service from this brand." Well, the employee needs to have even a much deeper understanding of those brand standards. So invariably, work comes up in conversation. Always going to happen. You're at a beer with your having a beer with your buddies. Work's going to come up, right? Hey, what did you do today? Hey, what did you work on today? Hey, what's your company working on at the moment? And if you're a low level position, you may not quite understand or quite know. But if you're mid level or higher, you got to know what's going on. And your company pays you to not only execute the plan that upper management is looking for you to deploy, but they're also trusting you that you're going to execute in a way that is going to make the brand look favorable. And so you have to understand what the brand is all about, the brand messaging, the iconography, how the brand is presenting itself. And so I take the idea that the internal messaging that a company does, no matter how big they are, is more important than the consumer branding messaging, because you never know when a conversation is going to happen where that employee can build a relationship and convert that individual that they're talking to into a paying customer. That can happen to anybody, right? And so that internal employee needs to know, how does that brand operate? What's it like? What does it do? That's how I look at it.
So I quickly want to make a jump before we go to overrated, underrated.
Yeah.
I do want to know like how you feel about like the transformation because everything kind of is always made easier It's
Hmm.
made more hands-on that everybody should be able to do it. Of course, you won't be able if you don't put in the work and the effort and the research.
Yeah.
But now we have like really like we've come a long way when it comes to e-commerce. And still, even with all the opportunities that are there,
Yeah.
like countries like Suriname, for instance, a lot of options just don't work
Hmm.
because of the banking system, because the
Yeah.
way certain things are set up.
That's huge.
Um, but how do you feel like um, websites like Shopify and those kind of easy to fix front ends
Hmm.
to sell, have they improved the state of e-commerce in general?
I think they have made it easier for a brand to engage in a transactional relationship with a consumer. Um, and it's funny you mentioned this because I was having a conversation with a distributor today that we're looking to convert over to our platform, and they were using a one of those kind of build yourself website systems, which I'm not down on them because I think they have lowered the barrier of entry to a lot of brands to be able to sell their and market their services or their products online. Shopify, Squarespace, um, Etsy, things like that. I think those types of platforms have their purpose and their place. Um, but sometimes you reach a point where you have diminishing returns, but then you also are going to push the technology of the particular platform to its limits, and then it becomes ineffective. So this particular company was talking to me about the platform they're using, and they just some of the tech that they're using um, is maxing out what this platform can do. And so again, I think every one of them have their place, but if a business is looking to grow and they're going to grow quickly or they have a plan to reach a certain level, they better have another platform in mind to transition to when they reach that point, before it's too late, before they start realizing that their website is broken, it's not working for them, that kind of thing. um, the one of the things I don't necessarily love about Shopify, and I'm just picking on them because it's the one I was thinking about more recently, is that sometimes their code's a little heavy, um, and they don't always have the best user experience at checkout. But those things can be edited and augmented on the fly, which I think is cool. Shopify does give you a lot of options of kind of what type of information you're requiring from the checkout process. Um, but there are certain things that you're selling that you might have to um, require lots of info, and that can kind of bog down the UX um, from the checkout experience. But again, it really just depends on what your ultimate goal is at the end, because every platform, if you need to have something that you're going to be able to scale, and some of these more lower barrier to entry type platforms aren't able to scale to a size that some of these brands really require.
Yeah, it depends on the market as well.
Yeah.
So if I look here, I think so. We have an issue with payment. Like
Yes.
we're getting there. Like there are a couple of really cool initiatives that are
Hmm.
going. Also with mobile payments, it's becoming much easier to do mobile payments now.
Right. Right.
Um, but I think like the two most used platforms in Suriname are Kitesite. I
Okay.
think Kitesite is kind of like, especially the Instagram shops in Suriname kind of go Kitesite route.
Hmm.
Also because you have the payment option, but also have kind of the reservation option, which means
Sure.
like it's pay on delivery
Yeah.
and WooCommerce. I mean, I think
Okay.
those are the two main ones here
Hmm.
for especially those that don't. I mean, credit card payments like in the US, like I mean, the credit
Yeah, we
card
don't
is
have
something,
payment
but
gateways.
we don't have the payment
Yeah.
gateways here like in the US and like
That's
in the bigger
crazy.
countries. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
there is literally no e-commerce site unless, well, that's not true. Um, Amazon or Shopify or WooCommerce or KiteSite or Squarespace, none of those will do payment on delivery. That Amazon, eBay, those are all prepay stuff, right? So but even if we were doing a um, a portal for a consumer, we would never say, "Hey, do this as a purchaser." We always say, "Credit card, guys," because you're going to get stiffed. Somebody's going to order something, and then all of a sudden they don't have the money, and you're going to be left with the product. Um, yeah,
You want to know the
payment.
funny thing here? So,
Yeah,
so of course, so what it says payment on delivery, but it isn't
yeah,
really payment on delivery.
no,
It says that, but you basically it doesn't get pre-ordered, so it doesn't get shipped because we have a lot of companies here who kind of sell stuff they buy themselves by Amazon. So
uh-huh.
they only purchase it on Amazon when the client actually pays,
Oh, sure,
because
okay,
so in the early days of Facebook, this is actually an interesting case study
okay,
in the early days of I'm not early days, but I'm talking between 2009 and 2012. There was a period in time that Facebook was pushing their marketplace,
right.
and people were just not accepting it. They were like,
Oh,
"Guys, seriously, this is a platform where people play games, so we're not
right,
gonna purchase anything. We don't
right.
trust Facebook." And then Facebook went all rogue and they were like, "You're not allowed to put." At the time, the cover photo was like kind of new, so it
Yeah,
was like, "You're not
yep.
allowed to put your phone number on your cover photo.
Nope, no
You're not
text or
allowed
very limited
no
text. Yeah.
text, no email address, no contact info on your." And there were companies in Suriname that were like, "Nah, it's not like they're going to check us." So they just went against
Whoops.
all the rules and they just started selling on Facebook
Uh-huh.
selling in private messages until Facebook realized like, This isn't really working. We can't
Right.
really control this. There is no kind of manual way to control this issue." And they were like, "Okay, you know what? We're gonna support selling on Facebook again." And then the whole 20% text thing came. Like, yeah, if
Nope. Yep.
you're not allowed to have more than 20% text on your Facebook posts because then you can't advertise it. And they kind of restricted the ban, saying like, okay, now you're allowed to put 20% text,
Hmm.
but when we advertise, we're just gonna bump your advertisement a little bit down. And now
Right.
basically all of a sudden we're like, okay, we're accepting flyers on Facebook now. It's kind of this weird situation where it almost felt in the beginning like Facebook got so upset
Hmm.
that people were like, "Yeah, we're not gonna use Facebook for selling," that they kind of went against every option to sell, and they realized like, wait, but people are gonna sell anyways, and that's
Right.
what happened. That's what happened with us. Like
Hmm.
pages that just started, it's kind of like we never had drop shipping
Hmm.
like as a real service in Suriname, but it was
Hmm.
kind of a different style of drop shipping. So, for instance, we have some people here using Patreon and OnlyFans and those kind of things,
Okay.
but also have our own version of it, which is basically just creating content and people just send you micropayments through mobile.
Oh, sure.
So
Okay.
yeah, so um, it's interesting to see how like the big tech companies and the big platforms kind of create ways
Hmm.
when they're not suited for all the countries in the world. So some countries can benefit from them, and they kind
Yeah.
of create their own version of it.
Well, I mean, everybody's going to adapt. Like
Yeah,
if they see that there is a need for something, they're either going to find something that works or take take an application that's already there and find a way for it to work with the situation that they have. I mean, yeah, payment gateways, man, those things are a mess. International commerce, dude. That's still something I'm trying to even learn right now, and I've been in the e-commerce business for a long time. We have a client in New Zealand that man,
it's
it's
difficult.
different. It's
It's
tough.
really, but would you recommend then to still kind of work together with Amazon because they have kind of the infrastructure, the worldwide infrastructure set up?
Um,
Do they though? How
yeah. Well,
worldwide are they?
we I don't necessarily we don't use
Yeah,
them for commerce. We use
yeah,
their AWS, Amazon Web
yeah,
Services for a lot of
yeah.
their we do a ton of our integration through AWS. Almost all of it is actually. Um, the thing with Amazon, and listen, Jeff Bezos set the standard for how easy it is to order something, right? You just have that swipe now. Yeah, if you have your payment card and your address, shipping address in your profile, you don't even have to go to a checkout screen. Just swipe to checkout, right? That's cool. That's good user experience, right? It also makes it easy to buy stuff, which is what he wants, right?
Yeah,
But
sometimes buy stuff you don't need
yeah, buy stuff
necessarily.
you don't need. But that's slick, right? That's kind of where I think that's a standard. I think that's where everybody needs to try and attain, if possible, to try and just make it lower as many barriers to enable that transaction as possible. That's kind of my thing, within reason. Like you still have to capture certain information so you can follow up with them, but um, that's why we don't ever do a true guest checkout user experience. We mandate that a user puts in at least an email and a phone number,
Yeah,
and a name. So
interesting.
yeah,
Um, Quickly to follow up on that,
sure.
um, does there automatically is there always an opt-in option for email for promotional mails when you create the registration for the user, or is it,
So
yeah,
so that's really up to the distributor and to the buyer. Or the buyer company. We have a module that we can plug in to allow for that, and it's just a matter of say sign up here for whatever.
but
Um,
is this an industry standard, and is the industry standard that, because in some cases you go to a website and
yeah,
the box is already like synced, it's like already saying
right,
I want, and you have to remove it, and
right.
then in other cases it's just empty, and if you don't,
In
yeah,
in this case, because it is an e-commerce transaction, we do the platform automatically sends out certain email addresses based on their transaction. Obviously, there's a thank you for your order email. Um, And more often than not, there is a shipping acknowledgement email that also gets sent out. But there you have to there isn't an automatic the user's email address is not automatically put into a marketing system, right? You can ask the user to opt in at a certain point in the checkout if you
Is
want to,
is
but
that due to regulations and privacy rules and laws,
uh,
or
when
is
it
it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in America we have certain laws in place that a a domain can be placed on a blacklist for spam if a user receives a marketing email that they never opted in for, and they could say, "I never opted in for this,"
yeah,
and that email or domain can be, or that domain can be, or email just can be blacklisted.
it's a can spam act,
Yeah,
I think, yeah,
it's can
yeah,
spam.
yeah.
And so so you have to it's same with text messaging too. You actually have to physically say, yes, I want those marketing emails, and they can't be already filled in. They have to be open. So you can make them required that they have to choose yes or no.
Yeah, yeah,
but
of course,
they have to be open. They can't be filled
yeah,
into yes,
yeah.
and they actually have to physically say, yes, I want these marketing emails.
And is a double opt-in also necessary, or that depends?
It depends. Political emails have to be double, but most like e-commerce, if you're going to incorporate a marketing solution like like HubSpot or Marketo
Right.
or Agorapulse, you have to. It's just one level.
Okay. So Diego and Jeff, do we still have time left for some over-unders? Because we already
That's
passed
fine, man. I
the
got
hour
time.
mark.
I got time.
Okay,
I'm good.
okay. So Diego, can we let's do some overrated, underrated? Maybe you can just shortly introduce the segment to Jeff.
Yeah, so we have a recurring segment on our show where we do overrated, underrated, inspired from Gary Vee's over under. So we basically just throw some random topics at you, and
Gary
you
V
tell us.
overrated.
You tell us if you think it's overrated or
Okay.
underrated, and you can give a brief explanation why or why not, depending on how controversial you think it is.
Oh, sure.
So, Etsy, overrated or underrated?
Oh, dude, come on. I think it's underrated. Underrated for it allows makers to really showcase their work, and I don't think it gets enough love for that part.
Okay. Adobe Flash.
Oh, dude,
Overrated or underrated?
that's dead.
That's that.
That's
Yeah.
dead. I mean, no, I hated Adobe Flash. That's the most over. It was overrated then. It's overrated now, and I think most browsers don't even use it. They can't use it
It's
anymore.
officially dead,
It's
but I
dead.
just had to ask the
No,
question.
I hated Flash. Hated it. Sucked.
Okay. Gradients in design, overrated or
Oh,
underrated?
those are overrated. They don't produce well in laser. I mean, you want a gradient in a printed material? Like, go back to 1995, bro. That's no gradients, no way. Don't use them. Digital is one thing. Printed, no.
Okay. Referral systems in e-commerce. Overrated or underrated?
Um, Referral systems. Um, Overrated but underused.
Care to elaborate on that?
That's a
Yeah.
smart way to,
Yeah.
yeah,
O- over
definitely.
Overrated. I think they're more work than they're worth, but they do have their place. But I think they're underused. They're not used as much as they could be for sales funnels.
Okay. I got one more here.
Yeah.
Offset printing.
Is not dead. It's alive and well. It is underrated. It's underrated.
Okay. Fair
Okay.
enough.
And the last one, QR codes.
Oh man. All right. So if you would have asked me this 10 years ago, I would have said that they are overrated because nobody used them. But I think they are learning to be, and I was a big fan. I'm still a big fan of QR codes, but they just weren't utilized because culturally speaking, we didn't know how to do it in America. And I think they are still somewhat underrated, but I also don't think that they're being utilized properly.
Well, COVID kind of helped, right? Like
I
especially
think
with
COVID really did help.
menus for restaurants.
Hmm.
Like it was there all along, but
Oh
nobody
yeah,
was
that's
like,
something you see now
yeah,
common.
All right, do I have time for a quick story about QR codes?
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so here's the thing, and you could edit this out and post if you want. But so what I did, I used to do when of course I was about big in integrated printing or integrated marketing back in the 2010s, right? Because I was doing print, I also was really doing marketing. So integrated marketing was huge for me. I was a big proponent of it, and I used a couple of stories about QR codes that blew people's minds. The first one, I'll just tell this one. So Taiwan was uses QR codes all over the place, and during their busy life, you could there would be chain of grocery stores that bought out ad space on the subway station walls, and it looked like a grocery store, right? So if you were waiting for your subway or your train, you could shop. You could snap the QR code of all the products that you wanted, send it to the grocery store, and it would be delivered to your apartment or your house by the time you got off the subway, right? And it was all done by QR codes, right? So it was like a really early version of, um, grocery store delivery services or grocery store pickup services that America's adopted mostly due to COVID. But 10, 15 years ago, well, 10 years ago, really, in other countries, it was being used very readily.
I'm thinking
And
of
and when I say print is not
yeah.
dead, so I'm going back to this one too.
Okay,
So
okay.
there was a music festival in Britain in 2011 that was using capacitive touch inks right? So they would have these music posters with this capacitive touch ink that if you touched a certain part of the poster, it would play like a 10-second snippet of a song that was going to be played at this music festival. Dude, come on, man.
That's
Like,
it.
and it never really caught on, which is unfortunate.
There's
Interesting.
some really cool
Interesting
things there.
applications. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I thought
Okay,
that was great.
we have one more question,
Okay.
and before we close it off, um, can somebody please explain to me why mega brands still
Mm.
spend so much on marketing when they already have so much market share? I already know what Coke is. Do I need more ads?
Dude, they have the money to spend. Why not? I mean, think about like what would happen if Coke all of a sudden took their marketing money and did something else with it, right? Now they did some really poor marketing decisions back in the day with Coke Classic and all the other missteps. Pepsi did the same thing with like Pepsi Clear. But I mean, imagine if they stopped spending all that money on ads. I think there is enough evidence that their market share would go down. And that's why they do it because the margin of who's number 1 in the soft drink industry is so slim that and they care so much about their brand position that they're gonna spend as much money as they possibly can because they
I
wanna stay number
yeah.
1, they wanna stay number 2, they wanna be there.
I feel also there are two things to take into additional things to take in consideration.
Mhm.
Um,
It's a good
one
question, Greg.
is one is awareness.
Mhm.
Like really, I mean, if and that's something we experience in social media all day. If you're like at the forefront, if you post every day, the algorithm will take your post and you will be visible. Like people,
Sure.
I feel like people underestimate. Like if you would post daily on any platform, if you would
Mhm.
post daily on Facebook, if you would post daily on TikTok, if you would
Mhm.
post daily on YouTube
Yeah.
or LinkedIn, whatever platform you would pick out, if you would
Right.
post daily, you would see a significant growth over a year time.
100%.
And if you would continue, I mean it kind of multiplies it really quickly.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the successful creators, it's what they've done. They've
Mhm.
never stopped.
Right.
So that's one thing that you have to take to in consideration. That if you stop, another brand is just going to take your spot, and people are going to start buying that brand because they see
Right.
that brand. When they have to make the decision, they go for that one.
Right.
Secondly, like you said, they have the budget. So because they're that big, other companies cannot compete with them
Right.
because they spend so much money that you can't get the same exposure. Just
Right.
yeah,
You just gotta hope for the
yeah,
whatever's left over. I
yeah.
mean,
It's
there are
insane.
plenty of brands that you could look at that have just they had all the money, they spent all the money, and now all of a sudden it's like their market share is diminished because they either stopped spending as much money or they transitioned to something else. I mean,
Or they bought their own things like Yahoo did.
exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
for
it's market
sure.
protection basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, this was very insightful on especially the parallels on print and digital,
Hmm.
and I I think more companies should focus on getting those guidelines, getting that consistency across platforms, be it physical, digital, or hybrid.
Hmm.
To do that, something that needs more, I guess, emphasis or awareness. I guess it's education,
Hmm.
and especially the point on educating or having your internal team or employees embody
Right.
that should be more relevant. But that being said, one of the Jeff Howells
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on to Social Convos to share your experience, the transition, and the fun story on the different Jeff Howells, which is quite interesting.
Right.
Brings up some topics on identity, which
Yeah.
we might have to cover in a future episode.
Sure.
Shanduk, any closing remarks, thoughts, and then you can close us out.
Yeah, I just want to say it was very insightful. People have said that as well. Um, also commenting on the internal client employee stuff. Um, Jeff, it was really a pleasure. I feel it went a little bit too quick, but I
Yeah,
guess
it
that
did.
means that we have to figure a way to do this more often and connect a little bit more often as well.
Sure,
We
man. I'm
really
game.
appreciate. Thanks. We really appreciate you being here. This episode is live on Facebook and YouTube, so and Twitch and Twitter as well. So people can review it there. The audio episode will be edited by Diego and will be available, I think, somewhere next month to play it safe on
Yeah,
Confoes.
I'm behind on schedule.
Okay, on Confoes.com.
We're getting.
The audio version will also be uploaded, of course. And thanks again, Jeff. We will be back here next week, same place, same time. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.